Hello guys, it's Ryan Ho back with another video. Today I want to talk about the Moondrop Blessing 2 and how this thing has 5 drivers in it, which kind of produces sound versus the Kato, which is the cheaper one, only has 1 driver, right? And so the Blessing 2 comes in at around $350 if you get the one with the nice faceplate. If you get the steel one, I believe it's like $320. So it's a little cheaper if you get that one versus the Kato comes in about half the price at $190. So it's a lot cheaper than the Moondrop Blessing 2. So we'll talk about what you get for kind of upgrading to the Blessing 2 and spending kind of, double the money for 5 drivers in the IM. And I can tell you that it does definitely improve the sound and in what ways it does that and if it's worth your time, right? So for me, I think the 5 driver configuration is very interesting. So they have 2 drivers to play the treble, 2 for the mid-range, and then one 10mm kind of dynamic driver to play the bass versus this one only has the 10mm driver to play the bass, right? So that's kind of the comparison, and let's go in depth in some more detail about it. And of course, I'm using the FiiO K9 Pro to do all my sound tests. Now this FiiO K9 Pro is really, really good. I'll probably be reviewing this next, but it's a DAC, and by like a DAC standalone, it's already really good, but it also comes with an amplifier inside so that you can run your IEMs and headphones that have like no noise floor. So it's really good sounding, and I definitely recommend it. And I kind of have enjoyed to listen with this as well. Anyways, I want to thank Airpods Audio as well for sending these for me to review, allowing me to kind of do this comparison for you guys. So they sent the Kato and a Blessing 2 for me to do the comparison. And yeah, so let's talk about the unboxing, and then we'll talk about the sound. I'll do some of the comparisons. And as always, please like and subscribe down below. Helps my videos out. All right, let's unbox the Moondrop Blessing 2. Now we get this nice art, just a simple black and white art. I mean, look at this snowman. Like, oh my God, that snowman is so just adorable. I feel like that's like the best part. Like everything else does not matter. But of course, other people will disagree with me, and I'm also joking. There's a nice reindeer over there with the sled. So this must have came out during Christmas when originally released, but I think the art's very nice, and let's get inside. And as well as, I guess we can look at the back here, which is cool. So we got some Moondrop logo, which I don't know what that says, water or something. And then we have introduction of Blessing presented by Moondrop. We got the QC card. Oh yeah, they're filter replacers. And then we have the call card. But yeah, so if you guys want to see your like pins. So yeah, they have these filters so you can change your filters and clean them out over time if you need that. Let's get into the meat and potatoes is in here. Here's a nice little case. And then we open it up. Aha, we found the Blessing 2s. Nicely protected. This is a big block of foam. I didn't even realize they're green. They're green? That is so cool. I love green. They look like emerald stones that were like polished, if you know what I'm talking about. That's kind of cool. I did not know they're green because I really like green. So now I'm like, wait, these look way cooler than I thought they would. All right, anyways, what else do we have in here? We have a box, tips, right, tips. So we got like an airplane adapter, I guess, that like no one's ever opened, and I'm not gonna open it because who cares about airplane adapters? So here we have the cable. It's a nice kind of copper sheen look to it. Of course, you got the standard tips over here to put it on. So let me put this all together and we can do some listening and comfort type of test. All right, so let's take a closer look at the Moondrop Blessing 2. So Blessing 2 obviously has these nice green shell. I was really amazed when I basically unboxed it, right? And then we have this nice clear shell that you can kind of see inside. So you can kind of see all of the attributes and what kind of makes it. You can see the drivers inside, which I think is a really cool look. I feel like, if you've ever seen those like nice watches where you can see the inside mechanics, it kind of reminds me of that. And I really dig that type of look because I feel like it just makes it look cool and unique. And then of course right now I have the other tips on. So these are the spring tips. I think the spring tips are just more comfortable and I think the sound sounds better. But I can also show you what the stock tips look like. And then of course we have the cable that is detachable on here, which is this nice kind of copper cable with a kind of layer of clear coating on top of it, which is really nice. So it kind of protects the cable and makes sure it kind of stays nice and together and also maintains its shape right over here. And the thing I like the most about this cable, I think, is just how lightweight it is. I think it's a very nice lightweight cable. And then of course this terminates into a 3.5 millimeter, so standard jack. Obviously you can get any type of cable you want because this is kind of, you know, a detachable cable. So that's nice to see. The comfort wise, I think it has quite a big nozzle is something I noticed. So it does feel a little bit bigger than other IEMs I've tried, like the Kato. So we'll talk about that comparison. So it does feel a little bit bigger in my ear. It takes a little bit more space, but I find it fine and comfortable, but not as comfortable as the Kato. So if we take the Kato like side by side, you can kind of see the difference. Like this is made of metal. And so I would say this is sturdier and is less prone to breaking if you drop them a lot, I guess. And it's kind of a weightier and a heftier feel, so there's more weight, which I think that's a negative in my opinion, because then you kind of feel it more in your ear. And then the cable's kind of a similar story. I feel like some people would actually like the cable of the Kato better because it's thicker, it feels sturdier, it feels more substantial. However, at the same time, the cost of this cable, in my opinion, is the weight. I don't particularly like heavy weights because together with like the metal and the heavier cable, it just feels like a very heavy thing in your ears. However, I think the nozzle here is just a lot kind of smaller, so I feel a lot more comfortable in general, and especially when it comes with the spring tips originally, then it makes it even more comfortable in my opinion. So I was actually playing around with the tips, but yeah, the Moondrop Blessing 2 comes with these kind of plain old silicone tips. And I personally actually like the spring tips on them better. I think it makes the sound also a little bit better in my opinion. It kind of takes away some of the treble extra shimmer it has and then increases the bass response. And I feel like overall it makes the Blessing 2 sound more like the Kato. It basically sounds almost exactly like the Kato with the spring tips. And I feel like it sounds really, really good like that. And that's kind of how I would recommend people listen to it. Something to know is that the spring tips and the Kato are the newer device, while the Blessing 2 was older, and they developed the spring tips later, but obviously they don't include it inside the package of this, you know, older product. But I think it's quite a nice kind of improvement in the sound, in my opinion. And then of course, the Kato I still think sounds better with the spring tips, but I did test it with these kind of silicone tips from the Blessing 2, and it sounded more like the Blessing 2. It had more treble, a little bit extra emphasis. So if you want that sound, the Kato is actually very well capable of doing that as well. So if you want more treble, just, you know, swap the tips. All right, so let's talk about the sound of the Blessing 2. So the Blessing 2 really has 5 drivers, and each of these drivers allows it to kind of optimize the sound in each of the regions, unlike the Kato, which has one driver that has to play the bass, the mid-range, and the treble. Versus this one has 2 drivers to play the treble, 2 to play the mid-range, and 1 to play the bass. And that allows each driver to really just focus and just play those frequencies only. And they can optimize the materials that they're used and as well as optimize the tuning of the IEM. And I feel like you can hear the differences because of that. In my opinion, the treble response on this thing is just straight up outclasses the Kato. It just sounds a lot more clear in my opinion. It sounds more defined, it sounds more resolute, and it just faster sounding. So when you have a lot of notes playing, it doesn't slur as much as the Kato does, and it's just more distinct. So for me, it's not really a contest in the treble region at all. Even in the mid-range, I hear the same thing. It's able to play it more detailed, more resolute. And then the bass region, like here I thought, okay, like this has a 10 millimeter dynamic, this has 10 millimeter, they should be really close. And I would say, yeah, they're very close, but I did notice just slightly more sub-bass definition in the kind of Blessing 2. So it's just a little bit, but they're pretty close, but the Blessing 2 still slightly edges it out in that region, in my opinion. So it is still better. And overall, the Blessing 2 sound I would describe as kind of neutral, slightly bright. It's not really like fatiguing type of sound, but it is slightly bright. Versus the Kato, in my opinion, what it sounds like is kind of neutral with a little bit of a bass boost. That's kind of how I would define that. The Blessing 2 has a very kind of neutral sound of the bass. So you get enough bass to hear it. You can hear the thump, but it's not going to be that like, elevated bass that you get from something like the Kato or something that's like really explosive and just really muddy mess. It's none of these are really like that at all. And then when it comes to kind of like the sub bass, like I said, it has really good definition down there compared to the Kato. And then when I move up to kind of the mid range of this is actually really, really good. Like I said, it sounds very natural, really full, very kind of just intimate in your face type of sound. So it's reminds me of the HD6XX, like where the vocals are just very like in front of you and clear. And it's just the type of presentation I really enjoy. Like I don't really like my mid-range to kind of be recessed and kind of far away. I just never enjoyed that. So the Blessing 2 is definitely something that I really look for. And this is kind of probably one of the best mid-ranges I've heard too. And of course, the Kato sounds about the same, but with less detail. So in the mid-range tuning, I think they're about the same. And then of course, in the treble, that's where this kind of does really well, but it just has more treble, which it does sound a little bit more detailed than the Kato, but at the same time, sometimes I hear the S's and the T's, and it's get a little bit overemphasized a little bit, but it's really not that bad. But I do think that's probably the weakest part of this IM, and I'm really nitpicking here. Like I'm trying to like, it's really close to perfect, like honestly, and I'm really nitpicking it. However, the interesting thing is the Kato is a little bit more recessed this region, and it sounds a little bit more natural, but it sounds like it also needs a little bit more treble. So it's like I want something in between the sound of both of these, in my opinion, for something that's like purely perfect. And this is like I said, still nitpicking. Like these two are really, really well tuned in that sense. But in my opinion, in the stock tuning, I actually think I like the Kato a little bit more than the Blessing. And now, like I said, this is very small differences. Like they're both like 95% the same sound, in my opinion. It's just that the Kato has a little bit more bass and a little less treble. So if you swap the tips on the Blessing 2 into the Moondrop spring tips, it basically sounds like the Kato. The treble comes down a little bit, still slightly more treble than the Kato, and the bass also increases with just slightly less bass than the Kato, but it essentially becomes a Kato on steroids. And the tonality, in my opinion, sounds a lot better too. So for maybe like $15 for the screen tips, you can make this sound even better. And to me, that's worth it. And of course, you could just buy the Moondrop Chews to take their kind of spring tips as well. It's a good option because it's only $20 and you get IEM for like basically $5 and the tips for like the 15. So that's something interesting that I kind of read on the forums because I think I'm probably gonna do that too because I like the tips that much. But yeah, in my opinion, you do that, the Blessing 2 becomes pretty unstoppable in my opinion. So yeah. But in the end, like honestly, I don't think the Kato is a bad product at all. I think, like I said, Kato is perfect. Like I think the tuning is actually better than Blessing 2 in the fall. The Kato just is, it's a cheaper product that doesn't have as much, optimization and money to kind of throw at, better drivers versus the Blessing 2 just has, the price kind of helps it kind of be built a little bit better in my opinion. And of course it does sound better. So that is what it is, right? Now, the last thing is soundstage. So soundstage I haven't talked about, but the soundstage on this is the most impressive thing I've heard so far. Like I was actually surprised at how wide it sounded because before this, like I feel like IEMs just sounded really close and they weren't comparable to headphones. But this is the first one that I kind of put in my ear and I didn't really miss the soundstage. Like the soundstage is actually really good and I actually like the way it sounds and how wide it is. And it just helps like with imaging. So like when you're playing games or even when you're listening to music, it's easier to tell like the individual elements better because they're not like this close, but they're like a lot wider. And it just really helps that. And of course the detail increase also helps that too. So for me, the soundstage is quite impressive. I'm really think that's one of the things that stood out the most to me about trying this IM is that. And of course, when it comes to gaming, the imaging and the sound shades is just bigger. So in my opinion, it's even better than the Kato at gaming. It's just a little easier to tell. I feel like the imaging is the same, but like I said, just the elements seem to stand out a little bit more distinctly in my opinion. So my conclusion is the Moondrop Blessing 2 at stock is really, really good sounding. I think it's really detailed. I feel like this is what people are looking for when they think about like neutral type of sound signature. And with the spring tips, I feel like it really just like enhances this experience even more. And I feel like at that point, it sounds really, really, really amazing. And I definitely recommend that as the default configuration. I wish they just kind of provided those in there, but I'm sure they'll do it in like the Moondrop Blessing 3 or something if that ever comes out. And that's probably what it would be like. But yeah, for me, this is a definite recommend for people to try. As always, please like and subscribe down below. Helps my videos out. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.